just finished my semester of college. My situation is a little bit odd and unique, I know that, so I'll explain it a little bit. It is my first semester ever as a full-time student, but it's also my first semester as a sophomore because I entered college as a sophomore full-time. I was taking classes for a while there for the past few years since I was a junior in high school. And I just graduated high school earlier this year in 2018. It is a little bit complicated. I just felt like I had to kind of explain that it's a weird situation because it is my first year as a full-time student, but I am a sophomore. I was taking all sophomore classes except for my art history class, which was freshman, that I needed to get out of the way. But that was my only freshman class this year. So I definitely decided to kind of throw myself into sophomore level classes just straight out of high school pretty abruptly, and it was a lot of work. It was harder than I expected to be. I mean, I passed all my classes with A's and B's, and I had 7 this semester, which was a lot. And it was very different from any other years of school. It was very different from the other college classes that I've taken during high school, even though that may seem like a lot taking college classes during high school. A full semester of 7 college classes is a lot harder. But I'm just going to talk about each class because I thought it would be interesting to hear. I'm going to show some work. I don't think I'm going to be able to talk about every single piece that I made this semester, but I'm going to go over a lot of pieces, some of the best ones, and just talk about each one and my experience with each class. So I hope it'll be interesting. My first class, I'm just going to go in order of my schedule so you can kind of see how busy my life was. Plus I had work on the weekends. I do like being busy, but it was hectic at times, and this whole final week was a lot because I had 7 assignments due. So, I mean, that was kind of how midterms were, but it was a little bit different. I don't remember like being this stressed during midterms. Yeah, my first class of the week was on Mondays from 2 to 5. My painting methods class, which was an oil painting class. And I love oil paintings. I think that they're great. It's so fun. And I've just been starting to get into oil paintings. This past summer was when I really started to experiment with oil paintings. That class was something I was looking forward to, actually learning from a professional how to oil paint. Because I was pretty convinced that I was doing it wrong. But I mean, what I learned from this class is that there isn't really a wrong way of oil painting. Like, whatever works, works. It's just, what I really learned was like how to properly clean my brushes, and it's very tricky when I hadn't learned in a formal way, when I was just experimenting over the summer. I cleaned them with like any oil I could find, really, but I ended up buying a little solid brush cleaner, which saved my life. And that was the only way that I could get my brushes 100% clean. So if you're wondering the same thing, you've been having troubles with your brushes after oil painting, just get a solid brush cleaner. And it works with acrylics too, but I haven't really had trouble cleaning my acrylic brushes in the same way. Acrylic just comes off with water, so yeah, I had a lot of fun with it, and I made some good work. So I'm gonna go through my pieces and talk about some. The thing with this class was it was once a week and it was only 3 hours. And 3 hours might seem a lot, but if you're in art college or you have been, you know that that is one of the smaller studio classes, and it was only once a week. So most of the studio classes that are once a week are 6 hours long with a lunch break in the middle. So it was a struggle because oil painting is such a slow material. It takes a lot of layering, and you have to wait for layers to dry a lot of the time, which I wasn't really able to do in this class because we didn't have time to wait. Oil paints take such a long time to dry, even just to touch. They take a long time to dry, about a week, usually even more sometimes, before you can actually like touch it and like go on with another layer of paint. I'll go through the first assignment that we had. This was a self-portrait. I was really worried about it. I hadn't seen anyone else's oil paintings, and I compare myself to other people in the class a lot, and so I was really worried that I was gonna be so behind compared to everyone else because I am younger and just for many reasons. So, but I actually wasn't. I was surprised lots of people hadn't done oil paintings at all yet. And this was actually a class that was mixed in with fine art students like me and illustration students. So that was interesting to see different levels of different things because the majors don't really usually get to mix like that in art school past the foundation year. It's very rare for that to happen, so it was really interesting to get to interact with new students. My school is very small, so sometimes you're only working with the same few people in every single class. Yeah, so this self-portrait I was okay with, but you might be able to tell I had to layer on the paint very quickly. I started it like a couple days before it was due, and with oil paintings you just cannot do that, and that's kind of what when I first realized when I was working on this assignment, is that you can't do that with oil paintings. You really can't rush it. Sometimes I did, I mean sometimes you have to, but it's not ideal to rush oil paintings at all. So the other thing about this class is we started out with doing a lot of black and white paintings and a lot of neutral colors, grayscale, just not a lot of color, which I love. I love working with color, and I think my professor saw that a lot when we started working with colors, that I just enjoy it more. The next assignment we had was an in-class piece. It took the whole class, so the full 3 hours, and I was really happy with how this came out. I love the moment where the front corner is and the drapery. I think you'll see a lot in this class. Drapery is my favorite thing to paint, one of it. I also love painting people, but I think drapery is so fun to paint, especially in oil paintings. So this was not black and white, but it was like a raw umber and white. So like a deep brown, grayscale type of thing. We had to focus a lot on just the composition of the piece and stuff like that. But I was happy with how this one came out. The next one we did, we had much less time to work on it. This was only an hour and a half timed piece. And we had to focus on the tones. For this one, my teacher said focus on cools and warms, and he showed us some examples of pieces that had done that. But again, I was frustrated that I couldn't work with color with this, because when you're working with color with assignments that are focused on the temperature of a piece, it can be really fun. You can get these crazy pieces of warm oranges and cool blues mixing together. It's just really beautiful. But we only were given grays for the cool tones and warm browns for the warm parts. And I know a lot of people struggled with this piece, but you just have to train your eyes to look at different pieces, and with this type of thing, it's not really about looking at the whole piece. It's like focusing in on tiny little parts of the composition that you're given. I also am not a fan of the drawings and paintings that we have to do in school that are focused on the weird little props that we have. I don't know, I'm not a fan of drawing molds and spheres, stuff like that. I love more organic shapes, I guess. Just people, things like that. Even architecture can sometimes be fun for me. But I do love drapery, and I didn't focus as much on drapery as this one because we didn't have a lot of time. And you can kind of see that in this piece. So it's a couple days later. My battery died again. But I think I didn't get very far. I was just talking about the temperature piece. So I'll continue from there. The next piece I'll talk about is a still life of grapes that we had to do. This was small, which I really liked. And it was 12 by 12, just a little square. And I was really happy with how this turned out. It was very realistic, and we got to work with the full palette, which was amazing. And I'm really happy with it. We basically just had to do an interesting, kind of non-traditional type thing. So, I don't know, when I think of like traditional still lifes, I think of like lots of drapery, you know, like a bottle of wine next to it, something like that, you know what I mean? Or cheese or something. So I don't know, I kind of wanted to do a close-up and I didn't want it to be centered, and I had a lot of fun with it. The next piece I did in that class was a 3-week long figure drawing of a model that we had come in, and there was 2 different neon lights pointing at her body in opposite directions. So as you can kind of see, it's like bright red and like bright teal blue, and it was pretty hard to paint the red part because it was pointing like right at her from my direction, so there wasn't a lot of like values in the parts that were red. It was just like very flat looking, but I don't know, I'm okay with how it turned out. It just got kind of muddy looking, I feel like, from the mix of like all the different colors that were used. I like that we had a lot of time to work on it. Next piece was a big one. This was our final I had to do, and I did a portrait of my sister just sitting at the dining room table, and I'm really happy with how this one turned out. I wish I had even more time to work on it. We had 2 weeks, I think, to do this. I only think I had like 4 days because I was in Pittsburgh for a little bit, and yeah, so I didn't have as much time as everyone else. But that's kind of like the main stuff I did in that class. I think that the projects were well thought out. I enjoyed it. Learning oil painting in a formal way was something that I had wanted to do, and I was looking forward to it. I don't know, I struggled with the time limits because oil painting is such a slow process, so I'd say that was the only thing I really struggled with in this class. One thing that I was surprised about was that we used black oil paint so much. And I've just kind of always heard before this class that like black oil paint is something you should like completely stay away from. It kind of grays everything down and just like makes your painting so dull. And I don't know, I kind of agree with that. I don't think that I'll really be using black in my other works. It just becomes very overpowering in oil paintings. I just think it's so much more beautiful when you mix your own black out of different colors. So that's probably what I'm going to be continuing to do. The materials in this class were pretty expensive. Oil paint is expensive, and he had a whole list that he wanted us to buy a specific brand. Let me show you the brand. He didn't want us to buy big tubes. It was just the small Winsor & Newton oil colors. But I think they were still pretty pricey. Maybe like $8 a bottle for just a small little thing. So that was kind of frustrating. For me, I didn't actually have to buy that many colors. I had some oil paints. They weren't that brand, but I mean, I just brought them in anyways. I'm not gonna buy the specific brand that's needed. I know that that's what teachers want, but I can't do that because I already have oil paints that work perfectly fine. I'm just gonna use those, and it didn't hinder my work at all. I still was able to make good work, and I think that as long as you're making good work, teachers aren't really gonna care if you stray from the path of their materials list too much. And I'm gonna make a whole video about how to save money in our college, but that's what I did for that. He also suggested we have like a glass palette, but I had a wooden one. I didn't have any glass palettes, so I just brought my wooden one in. Again, it worked fine. One thing also, he wanted us to keep on buying like panels of wood from Lowe's, but I actually had a ton of canvas panels in my storage of art supplies, so I just used those because I did go to Lowe's a couple times and I couldn't find the specific wood he wanted, and I don't know, and the one time I went, like their slicer was down, so I couldn't slice any custom sizes, so I just kind of gave up and used my canvas boards because they worked perfectly fine. With the 18 by 24 paintings we did, they warped a little bit, but it didn't bother me too much. And I didn't end up spending that much money because I just used stuff that I had. My next class was art history, and that was right after my oil painting class on Mondays from 5:15 to 6:45, and then on Wednesdays as well at that same time. So this class, it was interesting. I don't know, I'm not the best with history because it's so much memorizing tiny little things, artist names, dates. It can be hard. I have a good memory, but sometimes just with all the numbers and dates, it can be hard for me to keep track of stuff like that. But overall it was a interesting class. The problem that I had with it was that this was my only freshman class, by the way, and I could really tell the assignments were very dumbed down, kind of. I was surprised. Like, the first couple tests we did were group tests, which I don't think I've ever done like in high school or anything like that. It was very interesting to me that we did that. So I wouldn't say it was like an easy class, but it was a lot of like, it would be hard to fail it, I think. Just because she also like graded things very easily as well. Yeah, I liked my teacher. She was nice. It was mostly just lectures, and she just went through slideshows of different pictures we had, and we had to take notes of each one. So it was a lot of that. And the thing is, she had us buy 3 textbooks that we never used, and that's what really bothers me. One of the textbooks was like $200, and she said like the first week after everyone was buying it that we weren't actually gonna ever bring it into class because it was too heavy. So that was kind of like amazing to me, because I know there had to be some people, especially since it's a freshman class, that actually bought that $200 textbook. I did not. I just rented it online, even though she said that we shouldn't do that because we'd be using it in 2 semesters. It was fine. I just rented it online for $40, and it's gonna expire, I think, in March, which is already pretty well into the 2nd semester. And honestly, I don't think I'm gonna buy it for the for like the 1 month that we have after that, because we never used it. She would assign us some readings, but it was just stuff that we had already gone over in class that day, basically, in the lecture. So that was kind of annoying for me. I'm glad I didn't buy the full $200 textbook, but yeah. Other textbooks, I think that they were just small, cheap ones, so it wasn't as big of a deal, but it was still frustrating. I know we did have a pretty big group assignment that I just didn't really have time to contribute as much as I would have liked. I did contribute things still, but I wasn't able to do as much work as I wanted to, just because I absolutely had no time to meet up with anybody. But I know there was other people in my same boat, so it was okay. That's all I really have to say about that class. My next class was on Tuesdays from 10 to 1, and it's digital mixed media. One of my least favorites. I don't like digital art. I don't know. For myself, like, it's not the same. It's not like fun for me to just make digital videos. I also struggled with the teacher a bit. Maybe I'll just show some like silent, like little bits of my films that I did, but I don't know. The first project we did, my teacher, she was young and she was only there like once a week, and I don't know, she just didn't really show us how to use the program that we had to use. She didn't really give us enough feedback or really set clear guidelines for anything in that class. It was kind of a mess, and I know everybody felt the same way. That class was kind of a mess. But the first project we did, we had to do a moving still movie, which I know she hated mine. And I just kind of did one of my sister, just like in her room, just like relaxing and, you know, being bored. But I just kind of wanted to capture the, I don't know, a candid quality with that. So we could only use pictures like strung together. The next project we had to do, I think the only guidelines were that we just had to make something without a clear like storyline, like a string together of a couple of different storylines, and we had to use a lot of different camera angles. So for this one, I kind of wanted to talk about the satisfaction of making art combined with like eating your favorite food or something that's like really good. So I was like painting with a paintbrush and like eating this cupcake and stuff like that. The last project we did, again, very weird guidelines. I think it was pretty open-ended. We just had to make a video around 5 minutes long. Oh, the guidelines were it had to be some kind of performance art. So for mine, I did like cutting apart fabric and putting fabric together by sewing it, just to kind of like contrast different things we can do with our hands in the process of making and destroying. I know that's kind of a theme that someone else kind of went along with in their project too. And I know a lot of people did like putting on makeup as like a mask for the world, being like your performance or something like that. So I struggled a lot with just finding inspiration and finding a way to put my art into a video format, which is just something I'm not very comfortable with at all. It was a struggle for me. Basically that whole class was a struggle for me. The materials, yeah, we just had to use Adobe Premiere, and that comes, my school provides that for us. Pretty much everything that Adobe makes we can have for free, which is great, and we just had to use our laptop that we had to buy for school. A fancy Mac, kind of sad, but I mean, not complaining because I use it for lots of different things, so I guess it's a good computer to have. It's just very expensive. So Tuesdays, you know, I'm done at 1. That was like my most free day. I was always really happy with that, just to be out. I was always kind of restless in that class too, just knowing that like, okay, either I get to work on projects for other classes, like cram in as much work as I can, or I actually get to just have some free time now. That was nice. And then the next class I had was the next day on Wednesday from 10 to 1, called the book format, and this was a bookmaking class. This was also a general education class. It was required that I take 2 general kind of electives, so I chose book format and the next class after this one. I kind of regret choosing this class. I thought it would be really cool to learn how to like make books and stuff. It was a mess of a class. I struggled with this teacher a lot. She canceled a lot of classes. She canceled 3 classes, I think, which is a lot for a class that's once a week and only 3 hours. It's a lot to miss. So that was frustrating. She didn't live around here. She had to commute about 2 hours, so she wasn't really available to help out or anything. Like, she was never at the school, so she didn't really know what resources we had, and it was like a whole thing that was very frustrating to deal with. The projects that we had to do, we did 3 projects in this one as well. The first books that we had to make were, we had to show that we could produce multiples of the same thing, like a little zine style, just simple stapled binding. So I just made a little book. I mean, it's kind of big, but of the art that I made this summer. That's kind of what I decided to title it. And the thing with this class is that we did do a lot of printing, which costs money. We use the school printers and we have to sign into our account, and it takes a certain amount of money for each page. I mean, I think that's pretty standard for every art school, but that was frustrating. Just that a lot of her projects seemed strange concepts, or I don't know, I guess she just didn't really understand. I don't really know how to explain it, but it was just kind of frustrating to spend money on each one, especially for the books where we had to print out so many pages, and the concept was just strange and like not very thought out, it seemed like. But I mean, I like how this one turned out, and I think it got a good response. And I printed it in pretty high quality. That was something that I wanted to do. The first page, I mean, if you've seen my other videos, you know this painting. I'm kind of the painting that I spent most of my time on during the summer. So I wanted that to be kind of the first page, the first spread. And I did a little blip about it. And then the next one, I kind of talked about this painting that I did about a teacher that I used to have in high school. It's a little portrait of her. And yeah, there's not a lot of pages in here, but I wrote a more of a longer blip about that. The next one is a little sectioned off piece that I did in the summer as well. A little pastel self-portrait. And there's a little blip about that too, and I included the date for some of them. And then just more simple doodles that I made, just kind of the main stuff that I could think of, and then I ended it with another full spread of a doodle that I really enjoyed. And yeah, that was basically it. And I included this little detail. And I kept the cover very simple, as you can see. I didn't really do a formal cover for it, just because it is supposed to be a simple little zine style. So we did have to make 5 of those. So I have them all here. And it's just, I mean, I think I learned stuff, but again, it was a very simple project. I think we've all made simple little zine style, staple binded little books before, but the next assignment was our midterm, I believe. So we did have a lot of time to work on all these books, but this assignment was actually 2 books in one. This one's a smaller, simple book. This one was kind of the main thing that we were going to focus on. So this is a perfect bound book. Just how you make this is you just kind of glue pages, regular copy printer pages, into a thicker material cover, and then you let it bind, and you put it in like a press for 24 hours at least. I mean, I don't know, it was kind of messy how I did it, but I'm glad I learned how to do this binding. It's not my favorite. I don't think it's very practical. It doesn't hold up that well. And the concept of this book is what really frustrated me. We had to do, I think this is 200 pages. We had to do at least 200 like full pages, which obviously costs money. I think this is like $12 just for the printed stuff, which isn't that bad, but I did end up making another one that was kind of a mess up, or just like a trial run, so I ended up spending like $24 just on this, and it's not really something that I could sell or do anything with. The concept was we had to scan images in black and white and just use those to make a book, which is kind of frustrating. When I was thinking about this, I was just like, how can I make like a good book that's just scanned stuff? So I did, like, I made the best with it of what I could, I think, and she liked my concept. I don't know, I wasn't a fan of the prompt as a whole, and I think that's something that a lot of art students will agree with or feel me on this one. Like, when you get an assignment that you just are so uninspired by the prompt, it can really damage the final outcome of your piece that you're gonna make, and it's hard to kind of get over that and find something that can inspire you to make a good piece with what you're given when you're not given something that can be very stimulating or anything like that. So I just kind of titled this 41. It's just kind of about how I have 41 continuous sketchbooks that I've been working in from when I was little, and I fill them from front to back, and it's just kind of combining my older works with more recent pieces. I just kind of flipped in between to just show there's differences, but also there's similarities. And I have some weird stuff in here. My child drawings were really weird. Here's the one. It's just very odd little creature. So the other piece that was combined with this is a more simple bound book. It's just string. We had to punch holes in and then just make like basically one signature is the whole book. Very small, but the prompt with this was we just had to make like cyanotype. So what I did was I did little cutouts of drawings that I've done and I put them in the sun. If you've never done cyanotypes, it's really fun process that I loved. And I basically just put them out in the sun and waited until they made like weird little faces. And I really liked this. I don't know, I like incorporating my doodles into my regular formal art that I have to do for school or anything like that. Because that's what my notebooks are just full of doodles. And maybe I'll do like a sketchbook tour or something like that when I'm finished with my sketchbook. I'm almost done with it, so I think that would be fun to do. But the last project, this was my final, and I loved this book. I loved how it turned out. It is a hardcover, and yes, it's a little messy, but it is handmade. Like, I made this, and I think it worked well with what I included in it. I decided to continue the idea of cyanotypes into this project as well, and I wanted to do a little book of self-portraits that I've taken that were just kind of reflections in mirrors or glass. This one is a Christmas tree ornament that I'm reflected in, and I took a picture of it. I was kind of inspired by Vivian Mayer for this, which if you haven't heard of her, definitely look her up. Self-portraits are just really interesting, I think, so I wanted to do something like that. And yeah, I loved the linen stretch that I had to do over this. I loved that color with the blue. I just really enjoyed how this turned out, but the critique for this was rough. Nobody really agreed with me, I guess, which is always really hard. This year I've just taken critiques really to heart, I feel like, where I haven't really before. Like, I used to enjoy critiques and enjoy getting even the harshest feedback, but I don't know. Lately it's just been hard to deal with that, and I feel like the critiques I have been getting haven't been helpful. One critique that really got to me was that I had just explained how much I love the colors that I used in this book, with the little purple inlay as well, interacting with like the deep blue and the mustardy yellow. But one girl just said that right after I said that, she was like, I don't like the colors, and you know, nothing else above that. She wouldn't really elaborate or help me to find a suggestion for another color scheme, and it just didn't seem like the most helpful critique. It's just stuff like that that kind of gets to me. I think that sometimes critiques can be too forced, and there's such a expectation that teachers have that everyone has to say something, but if it's not helpful, then it's better if you just didn't say it at all, if you can't like actually follow up and give something of meaning to someone. So this class was a bit of a struggle, although I did like my final project a lot, and I enjoyed learning it. It was just that she didn't actually teach us anything. She just would hand us handouts, and we would kind of have to figure it out on our own. She did some demos, but yeah, she mostly just gave us handouts, which was a little bit frustrating. I mean, I did fine with them, but it was a little bit odd to me. The overall takeaway I have with this class is I did well in it, so I can't regret it. I'm okay with the whole work that I've made in it, and I didn't spend that much money overall on it, so it's okay. The materials that we had to use for this class were definitely a lot of paper. She wanted us to get like book boards for the hardcover book, and like a bookmaking awl, but I just used like a etching needle from my printmaking class that we were given as an awl. I didn't want to buy materials that I don't know, I'm very resourceful, I guess, so I don't want to use stuff that I have that will just do just as well. Linen string coated in wax, just like bookmaking string. and linen for the hardcover book, glue, lots of like good glue, not necessarily bookmaking glue, I just use like regular white glue, and decorative paper if we wanted to be a little bit fancy. It wasn't required. But yeah, the next class I had, which was also a general elective, was my alternative process class. So if you don't know what alternative processes are, this is, it's photography, but instead of like film, like just developing it in a dark room, you do like cyanotypes, calotypes, Van Dyke Browns, just different ways of playing around with negatives in a new way, which I really enjoyed. So I had this right after my bookmaking class, after the lunch break from 2 to 5 on Wednesdays. I really liked this teacher. She was nice. Towards the end, I don't know, her communication was a bit off, and I ended up missing the final, and she wouldn't really respond to a lot of the emails I sent showing my final, or like, yeah, her communication was very off and very sketchy towards the end, but kind of like unprofessional, I guess. But overall, she was a good teacher. I mean, she made good work. She was obviously experienced, but she again wasn't from the area, and she didn't know what resources we had in the school, so it was a bit rough with that. The projects that we had to do, I'll just go through them quickly because it's just a bunch of random photos. But the first project that we did were all in cyanotypes, which I really love. As you can tell from my bookmaking class, I incorporated that into other works that I did. And Van Dyke Browns, this was also a really beautiful process. The thing that I really like about cyanotypes though is that you can play around with them a bit more. You can do lots of different toning techniques, which you can with the other processes, but it's not really as drastic of a change. And Van Dyke Brown is a little bit more complicated. You have to do developer and different steps. But it was still very fun, and I thought the pictures turned out pretty nice. The last project that we had to do was calotypes, and calotypes was kind of a mess for everyone. I don't think that the teacher was as experienced in calotypes, but also she seemed pretty convinced it was just our darkroom that we had in the school that was messing them up because it was so humid in there. So that might be it, but they just turned out really streaky, and there's so many different steps in calotypes, like so many different wash baths that you have to do to put your images in, that it can get messed up in so many different ways. It's so easy to mess it up. So I don't think anybody's turned out very well with their critique with that one. She just kind of like had us put them up, and then we didn't really go around and talk about each one because they were all kind of fails. And then our final was we could do any of the processes. We just had to make 10 prints, kind of a collection of that. So I'll show like some of the kind of stuff I did. I kind of combined the Vivian Mayer idea that I did in my bookmaking class with this one. The main expense in this class of the materials was paper. We had to use a lot of paper, and she recommended like arches and expensive stuff like that, but any watercolor paper would really do. I used a lot of Canson Edition. I had a little notebook of that, so I just kind of ripped out the pages. Also Pictorico. Pictorico is what we printed our negatives onto, and it is expensive. It's like $1 per sheet and like $17 for a pack. Pretty expensive, and I did run out of it at the end, but I didn't end up buying a pack because it wouldn't ship in time. So that was a bit of a struggle. We also needed our laptop just to edit our negatives. We just did digital negatives, so you know, not using any film cameras or anything like that. We just took a photo, reversed it, made it black and white on our Photoshop on our laptop. We also needed brushes just to brush on the chemicals, so I just used foam brushes. We couldn't use anything with a metal end to it, so that seemed like the best thing for me. Overall, I really liked this class. I thought it was really interesting to learn about alternative processes. I had no idea what that was coming into it. So it was really interesting learning about that. They also had another class in the second semester, but I think it was all picked out because it wasn't an option when I went to register for my one general elective that I have next semester. But yeah, the struggle I had with this class was just using the dark room. Our dark room was extremely crowded all the time, and it's tiny and it's so hot and humid, it's insane. And we only have one exposure unit, so you can put them out in the sun, but sometimes it's cold or cloudy or whatever, so I just ended up using the exposure unit a lot of the time. It's a little bit more convenient, but it's also much slower. It's very small, it can only fit like 2 images at a time, so sometimes I would be there like until the school closed just trying to get my images exposed. The next class I had, so after the alternative processing class, I would go to my art history class, and then I would come in on Thursday from 10 to 5 was my drawing class. This class I really liked. I liked the teacher. I think it took me a little bit to get used to his teaching style. He's very nitpicky, but I like that. I think that he pushes people to just make better stuff, even though it's like changing the smallest thing. I think that it is helpful to have people like that. The projects that we had to make, I'll go through them. We had to do a lot of different stuff in this class. I'm not going to show everything. A lot of exercises with ink and just sketching figures, which I love. One of the first assignments we did was a little ink wash figure, just figure drawings with ink, which was really fun. I liked that a lot. We brushed on the ink, and I already had an ink bottle, so I didn't have to buy that, which was great. And it was very quick. This was a 10-minute, you know, pretty big. I fit the 18 by 24 paper pretty well. It was really fun. We did a couple different ones, but I think this one is my favorite. Here's another one. I think that one was a little bit longer, maybe 20 minutes. Same model, same day. Very fun, I thought. This was a project I had to do, I think it was like 2 weeks long, and it was just to do like a realistic, like hyper-realism of nature, but we had to like compose it in a very intentful way. So I did like a little wreath of flowers and some seashells, and it's 22 by 30. And I'm happy with how this piece came out. I thought it was good. I basically did it all in one night, which obviously is not the best thing to do. I also did this portrait of one of our models, an older model who I've worked with before. He's really nice and funny. And I know that my teacher really liked this piece, how it turned out. I'm pretty okay with it, but I think I could have done better. Something just seems a little bit off to me. But our final for that class, we had to do a figure and an interior. That was basically what we were given on a 22 by 30 piece of paper. A week to do it, I'm pretty sure. So I just did my sister leaning out of her balcony, and there's like this bush climbing up outside of it, and I spent a lot of time on this piece. It was an all-nighter for me. Yeah, I didn't get any sleep the night that I was working on it. I like it. I like how it turned out. I'm a little bit iffy about the bush. What I struggled with this class was, I didn't struggle too much with anything in this class. Drawing is really what I like to do, drawing and painting. I have the most experience in it. I made consistently good work throughout it, which I'm glad. Yeah, I'm happy with this class. It was different from other drawing classes I've taken. The freshman drawing class that I took, it was a bit more of a, you know, foundation, introduction stuff, though we did do that in the beginning of this one a little bit with perspective. I mean, I don't know why, but perspective is something that I'm always gonna have to need a refresher on, I think. Yeah, the materials for this class was obviously paper, just my drawing notepad, 22 by 30 sheets for the bigger assignments, and newsprint, which I pretty much had everything of that. And you know, then all your drawing supplies. And towards the end of class we got a little bit looser with what you could use, basically anything, color pastels, pencils, whatever you wanted to use. So that was pretty cool. I love playing around with color. And my last class of the week was printmaking from 10 to 5 as well on Fridays. And this class was fun. I liked the teacher. She was very loose and friendly. The projects that we had to do, I think we only did 3 projects in this class as well. We had a lot of time to work on each one. The first project was a etching on a plastic plate. So I did my cat with flower whiskers coming out, and that was really fun. The printmaking studio is really a nice, fun place to be in. I like just messing around in there. The inks will just stay on your hands forever. It's crazy. We have to use gloves, but it just still finds its way onto your hands and clothes and everything. But yeah, we also did a sheen collé with that, so I just added some little pink flowers to my little pink details to the flowers, and I'm really happy with how this project turned out. I thought it looked really good. The other projects were not so good. I thought we had to do a copper plate next, and this was a little bit more complicated because the etching isn't scratching into the plate, it's protecting the plate with something, making marks into that protective layer and then dipping it in acid so that whatever is scraped away where the plate shows through will be eaten away by the acid. But what happened with mine was I left it in the acid bath too long, so I lost a lot of the information, and only thing that was left was the moon, tree trunks, and the water. It's supposed to be a river. A lot of people thought it was a wolf, which I was very confused about. I don't really know how it looks like a wolf, but a lot of people thought that it did. But it's just supposed to be like a river, and there was a lot of grass details and a lot of leaves in the trees, but it turned out looking a lot more abstract and minimalist, which isn't what I wanted. So I was a little bit disappointed with this project, but it was okay. We also did some monoprints of that, adding color to it, so I'll show those. But the other project that we had to do, our final, was photo etching, which was also a very complicated process. And it's the reason why I missed the final for the alternative processing class was because I was in the printmaking room all day. I couldn't get out of it. I had to finish this project. And it also didn't turn out how I wanted it at all. But it's just some photos combined with drawings of mine. And I wanted it to be a lot more high contrast and had a lot of issues with the plate wiping off. This process is longer. We have to develop we have to print out photos onto a clear plastic, basically like a negative, and attach film to the plate that we're going to etch it on, and then expose it, and there's all different processes, then develop it, and then all this different stuff. But it just didn't turn out how I wanted it to be, because again, there's just a lot of different ways that you can mess up in longer, more complicated processes in any kind of art making. So it just kind of messed up. For this project we were supposed to include a lot of different monoprints and playing around with color a lot, so I did some of that. But overall I loved this class. I think printmaking is an extremely useful thing to learn, and I was really happy that I learned it finally. The materials that I had to use was only paper. And I had to use so much paper in all my classes, I just ended up buying a huge pack from Blick, because just running to different stores getting single sheets was too much. So that helped me a lot. Everything else that I needed was in the printmaking room, so that was convenient. So that was my semester. That's all my classes. It was definitely a lot, but I survived it and I did it. And next semester I only have 6 classes, so that's a little bit better and a little bit less overwhelming. I actually have Mondays completely free, so that's gonna be amazing. And yeah, I hope it's easier I just hope that it's less stressful. I don't know, I really didn't struggle too much. It's just that towards the end with finals, things just got so hectic, and I don't know, I think there was a lot of different things that maybe I could have done better or kept into consideration to make it less hectic for myself. I don't know, I just had so many classes and everything was due within that 5 days. So that was my first semester of college and my sophomore year. But yeah, my next video is gonna be about saving money. So that's what it's gonna be, and then I'm probably gonna do a tour, sketchbook tour. I don't know. It seems like that might be fun to do. I love looking through artists' sketchbooks. It's so fun. But yeah, that's everything. We appreciate power.